The crystalline doors of the throne room burst open without ceremony. Queen Elena's hand moved instinctively toward the ceremonial blade at her side as 6-foot-tall insectoid beings entered in perfect formation. Their exoskeletons gleamed like polished obsidian, compound eyes scanning every corner of the vast chamber. The royal guard's weapons remained sheathed, but their postures shifted with practiced precision. Elena remained seated on the marble throne, her expression unreadable. 20 years of ruling humanity's first interstellar empire had taught her that showing fear invited disaster. The aliens moved with military discipline, but something felt different about their approach. No weapons drawn, no threatening gestures. The lead figure stepped forward, its mandibles clicking in what Elena recognized as the Zephyrian diplomatic greeting. Behind the formation, a smaller figure emerged, clearly a young Zephyrian, its carapace still showing the pale green of youth. The child's eyes were fixed on Elena with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Your Majesty." The leader's voice came through a universal translator, the mechanical tone failing to hide the urgency beneath. "I am Commander Thix-Ka of the Zephyrian Defense Corps. I request immediate audience under emergency protocols." Elena's chief advisor, Marcus, stepped forward from his position beside the throne. "Commander, this is highly irregular. No diplomatic request was filed, and your approach violated 3 separate the child." The words cut through Marcus's protest like a blade. Elena's eyes snapped to the young Zephyrian who had moved closer despite the obvious tension in the room. "My offspring requested this audience, demanded it." The silence stretched taut as a wire. Elena had dealt with dozens of alien species over her reign, but she'd never encountered anything like this. Zephyrians were known for their rigid hierarchy, their absolute obedience to authority. Children didn't make demands that brought military commanders to human space. "What does your child want?" Elena asked, her voice carrying across the marble expanse. The young Zephyrian suddenly broke from the formation, moving toward the throne with startling speed. The royal guards drew steel in a whisper of metal, but Elena raised her hand. The child stopped 10 feet away, its compound eyes reflecting the light from the crystal chandeliers above. "I want to touch you," the child said in perfect, unaccented English. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. In 20 years of first contact protocols, she'd learned that when alien children spoke, civilizations listened. Their words carried weight that could reshape galactic politics. Commander Thix-Ka's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation Elena recognized from intelligence briefings. "Your Majesty, my offspring has been obsessed with your species since our first diplomatic contact. It has studied your history, your culture, your biology. It believes that touching a human, specifically touching you, will grant it some form of power." The word hung in the air like poison gas. Elena's mind raced through the implications. Religious obsession, biological curiosity, political manipulation. Any of these could spark an interstellar incident that would make the Rigel conflicts look like border skirmishes. "Explain the danger," Elena said quietly. The commander's exoskeleton darkened, a color change that indicated severe stress. "My species has strict taboos against physical contact with other sentences. My offspring's request has divided our High Council. Half believe it represents evolution toward galactic integration. The other half consider it blasphemy, punishable by execution." Elena absorbed this information while studying the child. Its posture suggested desperation. The young Zephyrian's breathing was rapid, its smaller claws clenched in what might have been determination or terror.
"If I refuse?"
Elena asked. "My offspring will be declared mentally defective and terminated. The faction supporting this request will be dishonored, possibly executed. Relations between our species will freeze for centuries. If I agree, unknown. This has never been attempted in our species' history." Marcus leaned close to Elena's ear. "Your Majesty, the risk assessment is irrelevant." Elena cut him off. She'd built humanity's empire by making impossible choices under impossible circumstances. This felt different, though. Personal. The way the child looked at her reminded her of something she couldn't quite place. The young Zephyrian took another step forward. "Please," it whispered. "I dream about your warmth. I dream about what it means to feel another's pulse beneath their skin. My people are cold, always cold. I need to know if touching life can make me warm." Elena's breath caught. The child's words carried an ache that transcended species barriers. She recognized the longing in its voice. The same longing she'd felt as a young princess, isolated by protocol and power, desperate for genuine connection. The throne room fell silent except for the soft hum of the environmental systems. Elena looked at the child, then at the commander, then at her own guards. Every face showed tension, uncertainty, fear. She stood slowly, the weight of 2 civilizations settling on her shoulders. The child's eyes never left her face as she descended the marble steps. Each footfall echoed like a gunshot in the vast chamber. When Elena reached the bottom step, she stopped. The child was close enough now that she could see her reflection multiplied in its compound eyes, close enough to touch. "What happens next changes everything," she said softly, speaking to both the child and the universe itself. The young Zephyrian extended one clawed hand toward her. Elena didn't hesitate. She reached out and took it in her own bare palm, feeling the alien texture of living chitin against human skin for the first time in galactic history. The child's entire exoskeleton blazed with brilliant bioluminescent patterns that Elena had never seen before. The light pulsed in rhythm, with something, perhaps its heartbeat, perhaps something deeper. The illumination spread from the point of contact up its arm, across its thorax, finally reaching its compound eyes. "Warmth," the child whispered, its voice filled with wonder. "You're so warm." Commander Thix-Ka stepped back, mandibles clicking in what Elena realized was shock. The other Zephyrians in the formation began displaying the same bioluminescent patterns, their exoskeletons lighting up in response to their young companion's transformation. Elena felt something shift in the air around them. Not physically, but something fundamental about the moment. The child's claws were surprisingly gentle, its grip careful but desperate. She could feel trembling in the alien hand, as if the young Zephyrian was trying not to cry. "Your Majesty," Commander Thix-Ka's voice carried new reverence. "The bioluminescence, it's a sacred pattern. Our species hasn't displayed it for 3,000 years. It's the mark of true connection, of souls touching across the void." Elena looked down at the child, whose eyes were now streaming with tears. Another shock, as intelligence reports had claimed Zephyrians were incapable of weeping. The young alien's other hand moved slowly toward Elena's arm. "May I?" it asked. Elena nodded. The second contact sent even brighter waves of light cascading across the child's form. The patterns were hypnotically beautiful, like aurora playing across living crystal. "This is impossible," Marcus whispered from behind Elena. "Our xenobiologists said their species doesn't have emotional response centers." "Our xenobiologists were wrong," Elena replied quietly. She could feel the child's pulse through its exoskeleton. Rapid, excited, alive with possibility. The child looked up at her with its compound eyes now blazing like stars. "I can feel your warmth in my bones. I can feel your kindness. I understand now why my people fear this." "Why?" Elena asked. "Because once you touch warmth, coldness becomes unbearable." The simple truth of the statement hit Elena like a physical blow. She understood now why the Zephyrian High Council was divided. This wasn't just about cultural taboos, it was about transformation. About a species discovering they could feel things they'd convinced themselves were impossible. Commander Thix-Ka moved closer, his own bioluminescence beginning to pulse faintly. "Your Majesty, I must report this to the High Council immediately. There will be consequences." Elena felt the child's grip tighten on her hand. "What kind of consequences?" "Revolution or extinction," the commander replied with brutal honesty. "My people will either embrace this possibility, this chance to feel connection, or they will destroy everyone who has witnessed it to preserve our ancient ways." The weight of galactic politics crashed down on Elena's shoulders. A simple act of compassion had just lit the fuse on what could become the greatest interstellar conflict in recorded history. Billions of lives hung in the balance because a child had dreamed of warmth. "How long do we have?" Elena asked. "The High Council meets in 12 hours. The vote for war or peace will be decided by sunset tomorrow." Elena looked down at the child, whose bioluminescence was still painting the throne room in shifting patterns of blue and gold. The young Zephyrian had given her people a gift, the knowledge that connection was possible, but that gift might cost them everything. "I need to speak with your High Council myself," Elena said suddenly. Commander Thix-Ka's exoskeleton darkened. "Impossible. No alien has ever been permitted to address our governing body." "Then we make new rules," Elena replied with the authority that had forged an empire. "This child showed courage by coming here. Now I show courage by going there." The child looked up at her, with something like worship in its compound eyes. "You would do that? Risk yourself for us?" Elena squeezed the young alien's hand gently. "Warmth shared is warmth multiplied. If your people are going to learn that lesson, they need to hear it from someone who understands both sides." Commander Thix-Ka was silent for a long moment. Finally, his mandibles clicked, and what Elena had learned was the Zephyrian expression of grudging respect. "The journey to our homeworld takes 8 hours by quantum drive. If you truly wish to address the High Council, we must leave within the hour." Elena turned to Marcus, whose face had gone pale. "Prepare my diplomatic shuttle, full ceremonial guard, and contact Admiral Harrison. Tell him to move the Third Fleet to high alert." "Your Majesty," Marcus protested, "you can't seriously be considering—" "I'm not considering anything," Elena cut him off. "I'm doing what this child did, choosing hope over fear." The young Zephyrian's bioluminescence pulsed brighter, and Elena realized the patterns were spelling out words in ancient Zephyrian script. She couldn't read them, but their meaning was clear enough. The child was saying goodbye to its old life, preparing for whatever came next. Elena knelt down to the child's eye level, maintaining the contact between their hands. "What's your name?" "Zith-Na," the child replied. "It means seeker of distant light." "Well, Zith-Na," Elena said with a smile that surprised her with its warmth, "let's go find some light together." Commander Thix-Ka's transport ship was unlike anything in Elena's fleet. Where human vessels prioritized armor and firepower, Zephyrian ships seemed grown rather than built, their hulls flowing in organic curves that defied conventional engineering. The interior was designed for beings twice Elena's height, making her feel like a child in an adult's world. Zith-Na hadn't released her hand since they'd left the throne room. The young Zephyrian sat beside Elena in the ship's diplomatic cabin, its bioluminescence providing the only light in the crystalline chamber. Through the transparent walls, Elena watched stars streak past as they jumped to quantum speeds. "Are you afraid?" Zith-Na asked suddenly. Aelin considered the question. "Terrified," she admitted. "But that's what makes it worth doing." The child's compound eyes reflected starlight as it studied her face. "My egg mother thinks I'm broken. She says healthy Zephyrians don't dream of touching other species. What do you think?" "I think maybe broken things see beauty that whole things miss." Elena felt her chest tighten. This child, this young alien who had risked everything to touch another being's hand, understood something that most adults spent lifetimes learning. The universe was vast and cold, but connection could create warmth even in the deepest void. Commander Thix-Ka entered the cabin, his posture rigid with tension. "Your Majesty, I've received reports from the homeworld. Word of our encounter has reached the High Council. They're agitated." "Define agitated," Elena said. "Half the council is calling for immediate execution of any Zephyrian who has touched alien flesh. The other half is demanding that I bring your entire diplomatic corps for mass contact experiments." Elena absorbed this with the same calm she'd used to navigate humanity's bloodiest political crises. "And you? What do you believe?" The commander was quiet for so long that Elena wondered if she'd overstepped some cultural boundary. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I believe my offspring has shown more wisdom in one afternoon than our species has demonstrated in 3 millennia. Zith-Na's bioluminescence flared brighter, patterns shifting to what Elena was learning to recognize as pure joy. The child looked between its parent and the human queen with something approaching disbelief. "You really think so?" Zith-Na asked. Commander Thix-Ka moved closer to his child, then did something that made Elena's breath catch. He extended his own clawed hand toward her free palm. "May I?" he asked, echoing his offspring's earlier words. Elena felt the weight of the moment settle around them. This wasn't just about diplomatic protocol anymore. It was about a parent choosing to trust his child's vision of the future over the fear of the past. She reached out and took the commander's hand. The transformation was immediate and startling. Commander Thix-Ka's bioluminescence exploded across his exoskeleton in waves of deep purple and gold, patterns more complex than anything Zith-Na had displayed. The adult Zephyrian's entire body began to tremble. "By the void," he whispered, "I can feel your pulse. I can feel your warmth flowing into my bones." Elena watched as father and child shared the same expression of wonder, their bioluminescent patterns synchronizing until the entire cabin was bathed in shifting light. She realized with a start that she was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented, an entire species discovering emotions they'd been convinced they couldn't feel. "This is why they're afraid," she said softly. "This is why the High Council is divided." Commander Thix-Ka nodded, his grip on her hand tightening. "For 3,000 years we've built our civilization on the belief that we are naturally cold, naturally separate, naturally superior because we don't need connection. You and my offspring have just proved that everything we thought we knew about ourselves was wrong." The ship shuddered as they dropped out of quantum drive. Through the transparent walls, Elena saw a planet unlike anything in human space. Crystal spires rising from continents of black stone, cities that glowed with the same bioluminescence she was witnessing in the cabin. "The homeworld," Zith-Na said, its voice filled with nervousness and anticipation. "Are you ready?" Elena looked at the alien world growing larger in their view screen, then at the two beings who had trusted her with something more precious than their lives, their deepest hopes for what their species could become. "Yes," she said simply. "Let's go change the galaxy." The Zephyrian High Council chamber was a crystalline amphitheater carved into the heart of a mountain. Elena stood at its center, dwarfed by the towering forms of 50 alien counselors, whose compound eyes reflected the chamber's harsh lighting. No human had ever stood in this place before. No human had ever been permitted to breathe the same air as the Zephyrian governing body. Commander Thix-Ka and Zith-Na flanked her, their bioluminescence dim but persistent, living proof of the transformation that had brought them to this moment. The chamber itself was designed to intimidate, to remind anyone who entered that they stood before the accumulated wisdom and power of a civilization older than human spaceflight. "Human Queen!" The voice of High Counselor Vex-Ree echoed from the chamber's apex. "You stand accused of corrupting our young, of introducing alien contamination into our pure bloodlines, of threatening the very foundation of Zephyrian society. How do you answer these charges?" Elena had faced angry councils before, but never while representing not just humanity but the possibility of interspecies understanding itself. She could feel the weight of 50 alien gazes measuring her, judging her, perhaps deciding whether her species deserved to exist. "I answer that your children are wiser than your councils," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. The silence that followed was absolute. Several counselors shifted in what Elena recognized as shock. Others began displaying the rapid exoskeleton color changes that indicated extreme agitation. "Explain," High Counselor Vex-Ree commanded. Elena gestured towards Zith-Na, whose young form seemed impossibly small in the vast chamber. "This child dreamed of warmth and had the courage to seek it. In doing so, it discovered something your species spent 3,000 years convincing itself didn't exist, the capacity for connection. Across the vast loneliness of space, connection is weakness." Another counselor interjected, its voice harsh with disdain. "It makes us vulnerable. It makes us dependent." "Connection is strength," Elena replied without hesitation. "It's what allows billions of humans to work together across hundreds of star systems. It's what makes us willing to die for strangers, to sacrifice for children we'll never meet, to build things that will outlast our own lives." Zith-Na stepped forward suddenly, its bioluminescence flaring brighter. "May I speak to the council?" The request sent ripples of shock through the chamber. Elena realized that Zephyrian children were probably never allowed to address their governing body directly. High Counselor Vexri hesitated, then gestured consent with one clawed appendage. "Honored counselors," Zith-Na began, its young voice carrying surprising authority. "For my entire life I have been cold. Cold in my bones, cold in my thoughts, cold in my dreams. I believed this was natural, the way our species was meant to be. But then I dreamed of warmth, and the dream would not leave me." The chamber was utterly silent now. Elena could see that some counselors were leaning forward, their compound eyes fixed on the young speaker. "When I touched the human queen," Zith-Na continued, "I felt warmth for the first time. Not just heat, but connection, understanding, love. And I realized that all my life I had been dying of cold without knowing it." One of the counselors rose from its seat. "Child, you speak of infections that weaken the mind. These alien emotions cloud judgment, make one weak and dependent." "Do I seem weak?" Zith-Na asked simply. "Do I seem less capable of thought?" The counselor had no immediate answer. Commander Thix-Ka stepped forward. "Honored counselors, I too have experienced this connection. My tactical abilities have not diminished. My loyalty to our people has not wavered. If anything, I understand our civilization's needs more clearly than before. Because," Elena added, "understanding connection helps you understand what you're protecting. Fighting for abstract principles is one thing. Fighting for people you love is something infinitely stronger." High Counselor Vexri descended from its elevated position, moving slowly toward Elena and her companions. The ancient Zephyrian's exoskeleton was marked with the scars of centuries, its movements deliberate and imposing. "Human Queen," it said, "you ask us to abandon 3 millennia of wisdom, to embrace something our ancestors considered a disease of the mind." "I ask you to embrace what your ancestors feared to explore," Elena replied. "They chose cold safety over warm possibility. You have a chance to make a different choice." The High Counselor stopped directly in front of Elena. Its compound eyes reflected her image in 50 fractal copies, each one studying a different aspect of her face. "If we choose your path," it said slowly, "we risk losing everything that makes us Zephyrian. Our strength, our independence, our clarity of purpose. If you choose fear," Elena said, "you risk losing something more important, your capacity to grow, to learn, to become more than what you are." The High Counselor extended one clawed hand toward Elena's face, stopping inches from her skin. "Show me," it whispered. Elena reached up and took the ancient counselor's hand in both of her own. The transformation was unlike anything she had witnessed before. The High Counselor's bioluminescence didn't simply flare, it exploded in cascading waves of every color Elena had ever seen, and several she was certain human eyes had never perceived. The patterns were impossibly complex, geometric forms that seemed to contain entire histories of thought and feeling. But more than the visual display, Elena felt something profound in that contact. The High Counselor's mind touched hers for just an instant, not telepathically, but through some deeper channel she couldn't name. In that moment she understood the vast loneliness of a species that had chosen isolation, the terrible cold that Zephyrians had endured for millennia without even knowing they were enduring it. The High Counselor trembled, its ancient form suddenly seeming fragile and overwhelmed. 3,000 years, it whispered. 3,000 years of cold, and I never knew. Around the chamber, other counselors began to rise from their seats. One by one, they began to display their own bioluminescence, faint at first, then growing stronger as they watched their leader's transformation. "I call for a new vote," High Counselor Vexri announced, its voice carrying new warmth that Elena could hear even through the mechanical translator. "Not on war or peace, but on evolution. Do we remain what we have always been, or do we become what we might be?" Elena watched as the ancient counselor's bioluminescence spread to Zith-Na, then to Commander Thix-Ka, then began to pulse through the chamber like a living wave. Within moments, the entire High Council was blazing with light, 50 alien beings discovering emotions they had denied themselves for 3,000 years. The vote was unanimous. As Elena stood in the center of the glowing chamber, still holding the High Counselor's hand, she realized that Zith-Na's simple dream of warmth had just reshaped galactic civilization. Two species had been transformed not by conquest or negotiation, but by the courage to reach across the cold void and touch another being's hand. "Thank you, High Counselor," Vex-Ree said softly. "Thank you for showing us that we were not as wise as we believed." Elena squeezed the ancient counselor's hand gently. "Thank you for having the courage to learn." Outside the chamber, the crystal spires of the Zephyrian capital were beginning to glow with bioluminescence as word of the High Council's decision spread. An entire species was awakening to warmth they had never known they craved. Elena looked at Zith-Na, whose young eyes were blazing with joy and wonder. "You did it," she told the child. "You changed everything." Zith-Na's bioluminescence pulsed in what Elena was learning to recognize as a smile. "We did it, all of us together. Just like you said, warmth shared is warmth multiplied." The revolution began with embraces. 6 months later, Elena stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest diplomatic station, watching as Zephyrian and human children played together in the void swimming pools. The young beings moved through the zero-gravity chambers with fluid grace, their laughter echoing through the crystalline corridors, a sound that would have been impossible to imagine before Zith-Na's first touch. The transformation had not been without challenges. Entire Zephyrian colonies had initially resisted the concept of emotional connection, fearing it would make them weak or dependent. Some had even attempted to maintain the old ways through isolation and genetic modification. But warmth, Elena had learned, was contagious in the best possible way. "Your Majesty!" Admiral Harrison approached from the corridor, his expression mixing pride and bewilderment. "The latest reports from the frontier worlds." Elena accepted the datapad without taking her eyes off the playing children. Zith-Na was teaching a group of human youngsters how to generate bioluminescent patterns, their small bodies beginning to exhibit faint glows that human scientists insisted should be biologically impossible. "Mixed marriages?" Elena asked, scanning the reports. "Increasing exponentially. The xenobiology departments are struggling to keep up with the research requirements. Apparently, extended physical contact between humans and Zephyrians is triggering evolutionary adaptations we don't fully understand." Elena smiled. The universe had a way of solving problems through wonder rather than logic. "Any complications?" "Just the usual diplomatic concerns. The Rigel Federation is getting nervous about the alliance effectiveness. Two species learning to function as one is making our neighbors reconsider their own isolation policies." Through the observation window, Elena watched as Zith-Na, now serving as an informal ambassador between the species, demonstrated advanced bioluminescent communication to a group of human diplomats. The young Zephyrian had grown taller in the past months, its carapace showing the deep blues and golds that indicated full emotional maturity. Commander Thix-Ka, now serving as joint military advisor for both species, entered the observation deck with his characteristic precise movements. The Zephyrian warrior's own transformation had been remarkable. His tactical abilities had actually improved as he learned to factor emotional considerations into strategic planning. "Your Majesty," he said, offering the respectful gesture that had replaced formal bows between their species. "The High Council has approved the next phase of integration protocols." Elena turned from the window to face him. "Full cultural exchange?" "Full cultural exchange. Zephyrian children will attend human schools. Human children will learn crystal singing in our educational chambers. We're also requesting permission to establish joint colonies on the rim worlds." The implications were staggering. What had begun with a child's simple desire to touch another being's hand was evolving into the complete integration of two galactic civilizations. "Any resistance from either government?" Commander Thix-Ka's bioluminescence shifted to patterns Elena had learned indicated dry humor. "Both species have discovered that resistant individuals change their minds quickly after experiencing first contact. Apparently, evolution is ultimately irresistible." Elena laughed, a sound that still seemed to fascinate the Zephyrians, who had spent millennia believing that joy was an alien concept. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Elena activated the communication system, expecting routine diplomatic correspondence. Instead, High Counselor Vex-Ree's ancient face appeared in the holographic display. Your Majesty, the High Counselor said, its compound eyes reflecting the same warmth Elena had witnessed during their first contact. I have news that may interest you. Good news, I hope. The best possible news. 3 more species have requested contact protocols. Word of our transformation has spread throughout this sector of the galaxy. Civilizations that have maintained isolation for millennia are suddenly curious about the possibility of connection. Elena felt her pulse quicken. Which species? The Ethereal Collective, the Crystal Builders, and most surprisingly, the Void Singers. All 3 have sent diplomatic feelers asking about establishing contact with both our species. The weight of the moment settled on Elena's shoulders. What Zith-Na had started was becoming a galactic phenomenon. Fear-based isolation was giving way to curious connection across multiple star systems. What are you recommending? Elena asked. High Counselor Vex-Ree's bioluminescence pulsed gently. That we send our wisest ambassadors to open these new dialogues. And I believe we both know who those ambassadors should be. Through the observation window, Zith-Na looked up from the lesson with human children and waved at Elena with a practiced gesture that bridged both species' concepts of greeting. The young being's compound eyes were bright with the confidence that came from changing the universe and finding it good. Elena waved back, then turned to Commander Thix-Ka. Prepare the diplomatic vessels. It seems we have more warmth to share with the galaxy. As the commander moved to carry out her orders, Elena remained at the observation window, watching as human and Zephyrian children played together in patterns of light and laughter that painted the station corridors with living art. 6 months ago, she had been a queen ruling a species isolated in the vast cold of space. Now, she was part of something larger, a growing community of civilizations discovering that the universe was far warmer and more connected than any of them had dared to imagine. It had all started with a child's simple dream of warmth, and Elena suspected this was only the beginning.